do when your man is upset or mad about something? How do you prevent the situation from kind of spiraling out of control or letting it bring you down? Like, how can you support him through this? So for those of you who are new, my name is Mireille Nicole, and I'm a relationship coach, and I love doing these videos and sharing these tips and my own stories with you in an effort to help you guys in your own relationship and making it the best it can be, in making sure it is your happily ever after that you've always dreamed of as a little girl. So I'm just gonna hop into it because it's Wednesday, it's date night, it is beautiful outside, so my man is waiting for me to go out. But I want to share with this, like I said, the story with you while it's fresh in my head. So this happened it started maybe 2 weeks ago. So we have a cottage, and my husband has been thinking about, like, do we get a boat? We're on a lake, and we were just trying to debate whether or not that was a good idea. It's a big financial investment. The kids are growing up and everything, but it would be fun, to have some sort of, water sports. And we do have things like, stand-up paddle boards and kayaks and stuff like that. But I have an adrenaline man. Like, he likes speed and the whole rush of doing something, fast and not dangerous, but difficult, right? Something that's challenging. So he's been looking at different options. And for the record, I don't know if you noticed my stories. If you follow my stories, you'll see that we like to electric skateboard. So he was investigating, what we could get for the cottage that would be, maybe like a boat, but not necessarily a boat. And anyways, I don't know if you've seen these things before, but they are called e-foils, I think, or maybe the sport is called e-foiling. I think it's an e-foil. And anyways, what it is, it's like an electric surfboard. It's smaller than a surfboard, actually, maybe more like an electric wakeboard. So it's got a motor. It looks like a board. It's shorter than a stand-up paddle board. It's shorter than a surfboard, and it's got this motor on the back. So eventually, after a lot of research and stuff, my husband was like, okay, this is what I'm getting. This is going to be our new cottage toy. And he just was so excited. He did so much research on it. He was, watching videos, reviews, contacting these different dealers. And finally, he found a dealer who sold these, and he just went for it and he ordered one. And just for the record, so we live in Canada. If you live in Canada or know much about Canada, we don't have a very long summer. And so far, this summer has been super beautiful, super warm. So obviously he wanted to get this e-foil, this electric surfboard, okay, as fast as possible so we could enjoy this short season that we have. So he organizes everything. It's ordered. It's supposed to come in like a few days before the weekend when we're going to the cottage. So he was all excited. We get this e-foil in the mail. It arrives at home, all these packages. He opens it up and the battery is missing. Okay. Which was kind of like the whole point of this device is something, exciting. We already have a stand-up paddleboard and kayaks and whatnot. So obviously it was like, wah, wah, we're missing the most important part, the battery. So he calls the person he was talking to, and apparently the battery was only going to come in next week. So whatever, we go with it. We go to the cottage. We have a great time. The next week comes around. He finds out we're getting it the Friday. And by the way, it was a beautiful weekend we missed. So we're there. It's like beautiful weather. We're like, oh my gosh, we could have used this. Didn't get all the parts in time. So anyways, it's supposed to come in the next week. Not too bad, right? It's supposed to come in the Friday. So we had planned to go to the cottage again that weekend. He's like, okay, we're going to get it the Friday. And, finally, we're going to get to use it because they were forecasting beautiful weather again that weekend. So it was like, oh my gosh, we're so lucky, we got to make the most of this. So anyways, that day, FedEx is supposed to deliver this battery at our door, but my husband had a work lunch that he had to go to. So and I had my own work to do and I was staying at home, and he had set everything up during that day so to make sure that we got it, that it would come in on time. And then he leaves to go to the work thing, and I'm at home with my son. I'm doing my work and everything. And when he comes back later, I didn't hear that. I guess they had come to deliver the battery and no one had answered the door. So they left with it. They didn't leave the battery, obviously, for us. us, so there was no one there to sign it or receive it. So, as you can imagine, my husband was super disappointed. He was super upset, super mad. He had put so much effort into getting this fun toy for us for the weekend, and now it's like everything had, just exploded, everything had backfired in his face. So obviously he was very upset. I could hear him, like walking really heavy and like cursing, and stuff like under his voice, but I could hear him, right? So I could tell he was really upset. He was really mad about everything that happened and, not getting the battery on time and not being here to receive it. So I'm going to share with you 5 steps on what to do to diffuse that situation, because had I not handled it the way I handled it, it could have easily ruined the day, ruined the weekend. I mean, he was so upset. He was like, I don't even want to go to the cottage anymore because I'm just going to be sitting on the dock looking at the lake, being reminded of how I was supposed to have, the e-foil for us to enjoy as a family this weekend. So I'm going to walk you through these 5 different steps that I did, that you can note because they'll apply to most of the situations. And obviously, depending on the circumstances and how, upset or disappointed your husband is, you might want to use some or all of these steps, but I think it's very important for you to just see the big picture. So I took all of these steps in this situation. The first thing I did was I let him be mad. I let him be upset. I let him feel his emotions. And I have to admit, this is something that was very difficult for me because, and I did a whole video on this. I'll link to it here if you're watching this on YouTube. But DM me if you want to link to it, all about codependency. And back in the day, especially when we were struggling in a relationship, my man and I was very codependent. And I know we were both very codependent, and that's something we've had to work on, right? So when one of us was upset, one of us was in a bad mood, and we're two, very emotional people, right? It would impact the other person. And when he would be upset, he would be mad, it would kind of make me mad too, right? So the first thing I've learned to do as we've done the work on our relationship and I've learned all the tools is to just let him be upset, let him feel those emotions, let him do what he has to do. And I know that's something that really helped me. And that's probably one of the first things that I worked on when we were struggling in our relationship, and I was looking to improve it. I really learned to feel my emotions, let them happen, work through them, not just stuff everything down, right? Because the more you stuff your emotions down and you try to cover everything up and hashtag fake positivity, the more sensitive you become, the more that builds up in your relationship, and the harder it is for you to keep your cool and to use the actual skills that will make sure that your relationship stays strong. So number 1, I let him be upset. All right. Step number 2, the second thing I did was I avoided saying anything that might lead to him feeling blame or shame or guilt, and also avoided being defensive. So this is where I was very intentional. Being intentional is so important in a relationship. It's something that I work with women on all the time because this is a trap we can fall into, right? Especially when we struggle with our own emotions. So from having done the work on my own emotions back in the day and continuing to do that all the time, right? And also by letting him be upset, then I was able to do step number 2, this step a lot more easily, which was to just avoid blame, avoid being defensive, right? I could easily have said, well, babe, you shouldn't have gone to lunch, out to lunch with your friends, right? You should have stayed home to receive it. Or I could have been defensive and been like, well, I'm sorry, wasn't my fault. I had meetings all day. I couldn't have sat at the door and just waited for him to come, right? I could have said all sorts of things, to try to, to try to not minimize the word I'm looking for, but, sometimes you just got to be careful not to fall into that trap of saying, well, you could have done this, trying to, sometimes we try to be helpful by doing that. Sometimes it's just our emotions and, we say things maybe we don't mean. So I always encourage you and women in general to be very intentional, right? So as soon as thoughts like that come up in my mind, first thing I'm going to ask myself is, okay, what's my intention, right? So when you say something like that, usually it's to try to tell the person, hey, oh my gosh, I don't know why my computer froze there for a second. I hope I didn't cut out. So, what's the intention? What do you think is going to happen if you say something like that, right? So I knew that if I was going to say something like that, if I was going to be defensive or say something like, well, you should stay at home, right? That was not going to help the situation. So I made sure to, say the least amount of things that I could have said other than show, just show empathy, and just even whether or not you say words with it, but just I remember to be empathetic, and thought in my head, you know what? He put so much effort into organizing this and calling people. It was a company in Puerto Rico, so he was like talking to this guy in Puerto Rico to get this, right? So I remembered, I put myself in his shoes, right? And say, you know what? It really sucks. And yes, I could have been at the door. He could have stayed home, or he could have reminded me before going to lunch, but that's not going to be helpful to say something like that. So that's number 2. Just be very intentional with your words, and always try to avoid saying anything that might bring up feelings of blame or shame, all right? Number 3 is I let him fix it, okay? I let him fix it for a while. No, I let him fix it completely, and I'm going to explain this. So one of the things I'm always talking about is how men like to fix things. They like to solve problems, and the more you can let them do that, the more, that releases their testosterone. They feel good. They feel like they've achieved something, and it just motivates them. So the more that you can let your man fix things, or help him fix things, or encourage him to fix things, or motivate him to fix things, the better it's going to be. So for a long time, when this happened, I had stuff to do, so I was continuing to focus on me, but I was letting him, be upset. So I waited like an hour or 2 or something before I went up to him to let him fix it, right? And then after a while, I saw that, he was really in his emotions. It was really bothering him, right? And I don't blame him. That was so annoying what happened. But then I went up and I said, I looked at the FedEx sticker, and I saw, there was a phone number and everything. And I said, hey, babe, what do you think if I call them? Like, would it be okay if I called them? I forget the wording, but something like that, right? I didn't tell him, hey, you should call them to see if you can fix the situation, right? Because that would be me trying to fix the situation. And I didn't say, well, I'm going to call them, because again, that's me trying to fix the problem. So I suggested it to him and let him tell me, okay, whether or not he thought it was a good idea, so that he could participate and help fix it, right? So I put the ball back in his court, and he was like, yeah, whatever. So I called, and turns out it all worked out, and they saved the battery at the store for us, at the FedEx store location, for us to pick it up later that evening. So before we went to the cottage, so it all worked out. All right. So when that was happening, I don't mean to make it sound like super easy, like you just do these things and, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Like I was working on my emotions throughout. And the fourth thing I did, and I do this all the time, is I give myself a pep talk, right? So that I don't leave space in my head for me to kind of think, oh, why is he upset? This is going to ruin the weekend. Why isn't he working on his emotional intelligence? Why isn't he doing the inner work? He should see a therapist about this. All these things we might think of, like, why isn't this other person, reacting the way we think they should, or we would want them to, right? So the whole time I was thinking in my head, you know what? It's going to be fine. We're going to work this out. He's going to work this out, or I'm going to help work this out. We're going to work this out. We're going to go to the cottage. We're going to get that battery no matter what. So I was operating from that mind frame the whole time. And literally, like if he wasn't around, I would say that out loud. I'll say it in my head. I'll say it out loud. I will give myself the pep talk, because what you focus on in your thoughts, in your head, that's what grows. That's what happens. That's what tends to expand. And this is a whole premise of manifestation, right? So if you're familiar with that, you want to be thinking, those thoughts that are what you desire to see happen. So the whole time while I was integrating those skills, I was also thinking in my head, we got this. It's going to be fine. It's all going to work itself out. It's all for the better. And so before anyone says anything, well, and I think I said this word already, right? Fake positivity, or I said that today at some point. It's not about covering things up. It's just accompanying the work I'm already doing. So the skills I'm already using in the relationship. So just another layer to add on to the situation. But I encourage you to always give yourself a pep talk. It's just so helpful. I do it all the time. And it just helps detract you from falling into the trap of saying something you don't mean, or reacting instead of responding to a situation. So that was step number 4. So the last part of this was, it all worked out. The package was at the location. We were able to go get it before we went to the cottage. We had a great time with it. And obviously later that evening, my husband was like super thankful. He was super appreciative. And he was like, oh my God, babe, thank you so much. You know, just totally praising me. And I received it, right? I just accepted the thanks, the praise. And I didn't fall into the trap again of being like, oh, well, you know, it's no big deal, right? Or minimizing my role in the relationship and the role and the influence that I can bring to our dynamic and helping us be strong and a team. So I just really accepted it, right? And even that's an important point to continue on even later, right? Like in other discussions, I could easily have said something like, oh, well, you know, you could have done this, or this could have happened, or said something kind of like sarcastic and jokingly about the situation, but I did not. I did not do that. Again, that goes back to the whole point of intention. What's your intention behind saying things like that? I received. I was in my feminine, if you're aware of feminine energy, I was in my energy, receiving the thanks, and just going with it, right? And that's another point that helps you build confidence in your relationship too, right? So these things happen, you use your skills, you use the tools. There's a shift in the dynamic, the relationship, your man recognizes that, right? And he praises you, and then it builds up your confidence, right? So I know not only from a knowledge perspective about these tools, but I experience it myself in my own relationship, in my own life. And then it builds my confidence when we come up with challenges and struggles, because we still do, right? Even though I have the tools, the knowledge, we have the tools and the knowledge now from working on it. We still get faced with challenges now and then, but it builds up that confidence. And then I get stronger, and we both get stronger, right? In terms of using these skills, and we can be more confident and more brave in terms of either expressing ourselves or supporting one another. So really important aspect. If you're having a hard time doing certain things or expressing yourself, the more you learn the skills and you start using them, the more that will build up your confidence. And it's just like an infinite circle, a positive feedback loop that you're creating. So those are the 5 steps. I hope this was useful. Hopefully your man doesn't get mad or upset all the time. Obviously, this is not the situation in my relationship. That would be kind of like a different video, obviously, but it's natural for us or our man to be upset every now and then. So these are some great tools that you can start using to really support him. So remember, your man is human. He's not going to be perfect. And the more you can remember that, the more that relieves pressure off yourself, because you're also human and you will also slip up and you'll get upset and whatnot. And the more grace you can give him, the more grace you will receive in return, and you can remove that pressure off yourself. All right. And remember, you're a team. Try not to sink in those situations. You try to stay above water so that you can also bring the other person up above the water also, right? And that just deepens your connection and it deepens your bond. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, if you have any comments about this, leave them in the comments below. And I'm going to go off for date night. Hopefully it won't be so long before I record another video. I hope you like this. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're here. Let me know this was helpful to you, and I will talk to you guys next time.